Hi, I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and we're excited to be here today talking to Blake Hall, CEO of ID.me, a company specializing in making identity verification secure and accessible to everyone. Blake, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Wyatt.
So, as you know well, this past year we've become an increasingly remote and mobile society because of the pandemic. And for citizens, that's meant really demanding access to even more digital services from their government agencies. And at the same time, kind of unfortunately, this shift has also left organizations a little bit more vulnerable to greater cyber risks, which is causing many leaders in government to really reconsider how to better verify identity. So let me start by asking you, from your perspective, can you share some of the challenges that government agencies are really facing as they look to implement stronger identity verification tools?
Sure. The first thing that government agencies have to consider when they're evaluating solutions is whether those solutions have been certified against the relevant NIST standards. And so for that reason, NIST 863.3, which lays out the technical and policy controls for both identity proofing and for multi-factor authentication, as well as NIST 853, FedRAMP. We are certified against NIST 863.3 through the Cantera initiative, which has current NIST executives on that review board and have our trust mark from them. We also have a FedRAMP moderate ATO, and that's really helped us because you can't usually get out of the starting gate, within a government agency unless you have those certifications against the relevant federal standards. The second thing is that our approach is different, and is one of the reasons why we've had 27 states adopt our technology in less than a year during the pandemic, in that we're an orchestration platform that pre-integrates best-of-breed component vendors for various components of identity proofing. So machine vision of government documents, access to telecom and device verification data to prove identity. So unlike a systems integrator approach where you have an army of consultants and you spend 5 years and $50 million, and as soon as you're compliant with the old NIST standard, there's a new NIST standard, and like the thing hasn't even gotten out the door. We take a true SaaS approach to identity where we already have pre-built components and policies. So NIST Identity Assurance Level 2. We do DEA certified electronic prescription for controlled substance for 10% of all the healthcare providers in America every day. And all our government partner has to do is map the appropriate authentication policy to the transaction that is at hand. And through federated protocols, to just federate in, federate out, they can be up and running and compliant with the NIST standards. So we've gone live with workforce agencies like California EDD, running 1980s technology, mainframes and COBOL in 2 weeks. And that turnkey implementation, that true SaaS approach to identity, literally strips years off of deployment times and de-risks the solution for the government. As the pandemic took away the in-person channel for in-person verification, that became a critical capability that we were able to support our government partners with when they needed to move fast.
Well, you mentioned California. Can you talk about any other examples that where you can give agencies that are representative of successfully implementing this sort of newer wave of stronger identity proofing?
Sure. Our first federal partner was Veterans Affairs in 2016 and 2017, and their challenge was, I think they had 500 plus veteran-facing websites, many of which had their own login system. And they said, how can we create a single digital front door, va.gov, that's oriented around the veteran's perspective of VA and not the way that VA's bureaucracy is organized, where people don't understand the difference between Veterans Benefits Administration, Veterans Healthcare Administration, and so on. And so what we did was we power the identity proofing and multi-factor authentication for VA's My Healthy Vet. So if you go to va.gov, and immediately made that service compliant with the NIST standards within the VA's look and feel, as well as introducing ID.me. And so there's an element of choice, and we've worked with NIST on 2 grant programs where NIST has awarded us over $5 million to further the adoption of our technology since 2013, in that if somebody picks the VA's credential, it's kind of like a Macy's store card. It's the same features, the same level of trust that VA inherited, but the login is only locally useful at the VA. By contrast, if you verify with ID.me, you can then have single sign-on to Social Security to the IRS's Child Advanced Tax Care Credit Program, to 27 state workforce agencies, even to access healthcare records, or if you're a doctor or physician, you could use it in the course of your employment. So VA really kind of set the template where we can upgrade the government system within their look and feel, as well as introducing this portable login that allows one identity verification event to serve many different partners. And if I think about like Arizona in the context of unemployment, the week before they integrated us, they were just really suffering from fraud. There were over 570,000 new unemployment claims filed in a week for the pandemic unemployment assistance program. After our introduction, 6,700, 99% of them were fraud. There was so much fraud in California, they had to shut down their system for the last 2 weeks of September. We went live on October 1st, allow that system to open back up and to help, deliver life-saving unemployment benefits to families who were deserving, while also keeping these organized crime rings out of Eastern Europe and West Africa from ravaging the state and taking our federal dollars. So, our growth today, we have 49 million members. We sign up over 210,000 people per day. We issue over 100,000 NIST IEL2 credentials per day. And if you put that in context, the California DMV each month issues about 500,000 new licenses. So to be issuing 100,000 plus NIST credentials a day is a pretty remarkable achievement. And I'm very proud of what we accomplished, starting with the VA, and over the last year, helping these 27 states deliver aid while preventing fraud.
Well, Blake, I know we had to change venues here. Thanks for rejoining us. Let me continue our conversation here. I want to kind of talk a little bit from the user perspective. Digital identity verification is challenging, really, for many segments of the U.S. population: senior citizens, lower income households, new immigrants, et cetera. So talk to us a little about how ID.me is really able to ensure that everyone has equal access and that no identity is left behind.
Sure. So everyone is familiar with the password problem. It's probably the most universally annoying part of using the internet. But when you talk about services that are higher risk, like in government and healthcare and financial services that require identity verification, the process is a lot more time intensive when you have to re-verify who you are at every single website that you go to. And it was in fact for that precise reason that NIST in 2011 came up with a national strategy for trusted identities in cyberspace, which said, instead of having everyone create a new login and re-verify who they are at each government agency they visit, often with the same vendor like a credit bureau, let's verify somebody once and then let them take their login and their verified data with them so that they can have single sign-on, consumer single sign-on to agencies. And so as we got farther into the NIST 863.2 standards, we realized that there were some real structural inequities tied to those standards. Namely, the only way to verify your identity online was if you could validate that individual's information and records. And so there were a few communities that were completely excluded. Like if you're a veteran that lives in Japan or in Germany, you're not in records in a data broker or credit bureau in the United States because you live in a different country. You'll also find that credit bureaus will work with various agencies. And so it begs the question, what if you don't have credit history? And as we started to trace down, like, well, who's less likely to have credit history? Less affluent Americans. Who's more likely to be less affluent? Minority communities. And women in our country have a higher propensity to change their name. And so women are more likely to be listed inaccurately in records at higher rates. So the logical conclusion of all this was that by virtue of being a minority or a woman, you have lower rates of access to your government. And we just thought that was completely unacceptable. And so we came up with a product called virtual in-person proofing. We worked with NIST as they developed the NIST 863.3 standards, and it's called supervised remote. And just like you and I are talking in video chat, if you're not able to validate your information in records, or like someone's transposed your birth date, you can still verify in video chat using your identity document and your face with a live ID.me agent. Once your identity is tied to that login, then wherever ID.me is at, you have equitable access. Simply by logging in and providing consent, you can prove who you are. So in the same way that going to the DMV is never like a fun process to verify who you are, But when you leave with a driver's license, it can help you buy a bottle of wine at a liquor store. It can help you get onto an aircraft. It can help you check into a hotel. That's exactly what ID.me is doing. Like, no matter which agency you encounter the first time, no matter how you verify, we can get you through. And as an example of that, there was an 81-year-old veteran in Japan. His wife had Alzheimer's that he was caring for her, and he hadn't been able to interact with Veterans Affairs, in years. And so when we deployed this technology at VA in 2018, we were able to verify him. And for the first time in years, he was able to get access to his benefits. And he cried we cried. It was very emotional to break down some of these access barriers that had existed for communities that have historically been left behind by a data broker only approach. We had a California business owner who had 30 minutes left to register his business before a deadline, or he wouldn't be able to bid on contracts. In records, his date of birth was listed as 1997, and he's there with his ID, and he goes, "Nope, it's 1979. Like, they must have flipped the last two digits." He's like, "I wish my birthday was 1997, but he was like, oh my goodness, thank you so much. Like, if this didn't exist, I'd have been toast, because I procrastinated, and like, I just don't have time to go in person to prove who I am because I have to register, before the hour's up." And now we've verified 1.24 million people through that video chat process. And these are all folks, whether they're minorities or women or folks who live overseas or homeless veterans. We've restored their access to the government. And once it's restored, when we weren't at Social Security, we're at Social Security now. That veteran who we got through with video proofing, he couldn't go into access to Social Security benefits or his disability benefits either, because they use Equifax, and he's not in Equifax. But now that ID.me's login is over there, he can use that video verification event from the VA, log in, give consent, and now can prove his identity faster than even more affluent Americans who live domestically. And the same is true for historically, disadvantaged groups. And we have quantitatively made the market more equitable and inclusive, and have helped NIST make their standards, by extension, more equitable and inclusive as well over the years.
Well, those stories really certainly suggest the challenges that citizens have, through no fault of their own, and really the way government agencies are able to, overcome some of the barriers that they face. Let me ask next, where do you see identity proofing headed in the next 5 years, and how do you see ID.me really playing a part in that evolution?
I think the trend really here is empowering people to own their own information and to have it move with them wherever they go, whether it's through the digital channel, in person, through the call center. This model where data brokers that Americans have never heard of and have never given consent to have their information sell your data 30 different ways, and it excludes communities. That's got to go, and it is going. So some of the things that we're working on, to expand access, is that language accessibility is a really important part of what we're working on to advance inclusion. So, in the South, Creole speaking populations, simplified Chinese on the West Coast, Hindi and Tagalog in states like California that are very diverse, not only in our software-based flows so that you can access those flows in your native tongue if you speak English as a second language, but also creating micro cues within our video chat experience so that, how do we match a Mandarin speaker with a Mandarin speaker, a Tagalog speaker with a Tagalog speaker? We've also noticed that things like having internet access can be a barrier to proving who you are as well. And so we're opening up a network of over 500 retail locations where folks can come in person to prove who they are if they don't have, a device or a stable internet connection that would, help them through the identity proofing process. And then once they're verified, all they have to do is log in to get access to the government service. So those are the types of things, it's how do we expand access and pass rates for the initial identity verification. And then our goal, to borrow a tagline for Visa, is to be everywhere that people want to be, so that once you have that digital credential, the same way that when you show up at an organization, they accept a Visa card, it makes transacting super simple. That's our goal, is that we might, regardless of whether we verified you through software, through a video chat call, through an in-person visit at a retail outlet, once your login's verified, you have equitable access and you can prove who you are in a few seconds to any organization that has our button there. And now with 5 federal agencies, 27 states, and over 500 commercial organizations were really advancing a consumer-centric model for identity. And it's not just for government. Just like your driver's license isn't just to drive, it's to help you prove who you are in every aspect of your life and to do that more efficiently.
That sounds impressive. Finally, what recommendations would you leave our audience to really start implementing even stronger authentication controls at scale?
Sure. Well, I think OMB M1917 does a great job of outlining a lot of that. And it says that agencies need to use government, federally provided or commercially provided shared services for authentication. And that's to reduce the identity verification burden on the public. You know, the password problem is annoying. Having duplicative identity proofing actually excludes large segments of the American population from access to their government. When COVID took away, you know, the in-person channel, it's shown a spotlight on how much we need to advance our digital capabilities to align to OMB M1917. So everything's, you know, set out there. Certainly, we're a federated identity provider that's in the space and are an example of the NIST standards 863 and 53 being very effective, that you can have both access and security. And so, you know, we're at id.me, and if folks want to come over and get a demo or have, you know, get more information about how our service works, we'd be glad to walk folks through the implementation side.
Well, Blake, thank you so much for taking time to join us and really kind of shedding new light on the possibilities of what can be done with ID management and some of the really revolutionary ways that we can overcome some of the digital barriers that citizens often face. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Wyatt. Really appreciate it.